Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Paradise Recreation and Park District Board of Directors regular meeting of January 14th, 2026. Would you all please stand and join me in a pledge of allegiance? Thank you, everyone. Madam Clerk, can we please call the roll, please?
Director John Stonebreaker.
Here.
Director Robert Anderson is absent today. Secretary Jolene is also absent. Vice Chairperson Steve Rodwick.
Here.
And Chairperson Alma Green.
Here. Let the record show we have a quorum so we can proceed with tonight's meeting. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next item on the agenda is I want to personally welcome all our guests this evening. Thank you for coming out on this kind of cool evening in January, but at least it's not precipitating, which is nice. Item 1.4, special presentation. Tonight, I believe we have Mr. Jim McCourt of Meter Investments here tonight. And this is the time where you can give us your presentation on the benefit of the board and the audience. So please come forward, Jim. Thank you and welcome.
While we're getting the slides up here, thank you for coming out, by the way.
You're welcome.
Looks like it's ready to go.
Looks like we're ready to go. You also have a physical copy of the presentation on your desk there as well. So glad to be here to give you an update on the investment portfolio of the district. Just as a quick reintroduction to myself, Jim McCourt with Meter Public Funds. We are a fiduciary registered investment advisor that acts exclusively on behalf of public entities around the country to help manage their investment portfolios. So working with over 450 public entities nationwide, over 40 within the state of California, and then also very ingrained within Paradise. We work with the town and with Paradise Irrigation District as well to also help manage really the investments that all three entities receive primarily from the settlement funds from the PG&E, from the settlement. So we began working with the district in late 2022. Which, as we've talked about in previous presentations, turned out to really be a good time to be able to get those funds invested into the market. And you've been able to really see some nice benefits in the investment returns you've seen because of that timing and the action by the district staff to really take some proactive measures to lock in interest rates that were available at that time. To give you a brief update on what's going on in the market. This is by California government code, these funds are invested in fixed income securities. So that means we're buying interest rate products with this investment portfolio, which means that you're very sensitive to what the Federal Reserve is doing with monetary policy and with interest rates. So as you probably are aware, this year the Fed has resumed reducing interest rates primarily in the fourth quarter of the year. They did it by 1 full percentage point in late 2024, did it by another 0.75% in late 2025. So we've seen a little bit of a reduction off of the highest rates that we saw previously when you first started investing this portfolio. Looking forward, as we'll flip 2 pages forward into what the Fed or what the market's view is. Looking into 2026, we can go 1 more page forward than that. The market is anticipating at this point likely seeing maybe 2 more rate cuts throughout 2026, possibly 3. But there's certainly a lot of uncertainty about what that projection is going to look like right now. The Fed continues to maintain, try to balance their dual mandate of trying to maintain price stability, which is why rates were so high to begin with a couple of years ago, is to try to combat the significant inflation that really developed coming out of the pandemic. And on the other side, they're trying to maintain full employment in the nation. And so those are really competing arguments. When employment measures are struggling, that argues for lower rates. But on the other side, with inflation still relatively high, that argues for higher rates. So the Fed's trying to find the right balance of where an appropriate level of interest rates can be to see an overall successfully growing economy. You're probably also aware that there's some significant political pressure on the Fed right now to continue to lower rates. So we'll see. Nobody knows exactly how that's going to play out throughout 2026, what happens when a new Fed chairman comes in May, and what the new makeup of the Federal Reserve looks like could be completely different. So plenty of unknowns out there, but based on what we know at this point, looking at maybe 2 or 3 more rate cuts throughout this year. On to the next slide. Just one last one on the markets, just to give you an idea, some visual about, I mentioned what things have done the last couple of years. Going back into that early 2023 timeframe, when rates were still at their peak, both when you're talking about the Fed funds, which is overnight borrowing rates, and then also looking at the 2-year Treasury as a representative example of the types of rates that you're able to buy with securities for this portfolio. A Treasury is generally seen as a baseline investment, a fixed income investment, and then different other types of fixed income asset classes that we can buy are typically priced off of Treasuries. So we would get a little bit more additional yield than where you see the Treasury yield market at. But either way, you can see that over the last couple of years, we've seen that general trend downward. But relative to where we've been the last 2 decades, rates are still relatively high overall. So it still offers an opportunity to continue to invest as much of these funds as we can into the market, continue to lock in rates that'll benefit you with guaranteed returns over the next 3, 4, 5 years. 5 years is the maximum allowable maturity that you can buy with fixed income investments under the California State Government Code. Now, getting into the portfolio on the next slide, be one more from here, right there. So this is the look at the Recreation and Park District portfolio as of the end of December. So the securities book value is the cost of the investments that we are managing on your behalf. So that's about $32.5 million. That represents the amount that you've paid for these securities. There is a bunch. This is all a summary page. There is a bunch of underlying securities within the portfolio that later in your packet I have the detail of, but I'll focus on the summary page here. When you look at all of those securities, the weighted average maturity of them is right at about 2.5 years. So you can see that distribution on the bottom that represents sort of a laddered approach to these investments. So some are maturing really every month, and then as they get toward maturity and we reinvest them, we generally take them out to the longer end and try to put them out 3 to 4 to 5 years. Every day, every bond gets a day closer to maturity. So we're always fighting an aging of this portfolio. So we're trying to reinvest it out longer and try to keep that duration somewhere around 2.5 years to be able to lock in and sort of insulate you against potential further reductions in rates coming by having the portfolio locked into the rates that are currently available. That weighted average yield to maturity of 4.36%. It's come off a little bit of its peak from when you first invested, but it's still a very attractive yield for this type of portfolio. That represents the expected yield to maturity on all of the underlying investments within the portfolio. Current market rates are down in that 3.5 to 3.75% range. So your portfolio at 4.36% means you own everything that you own in here is at above market rates, meaning that you have a lot of unrealized capital gains. You have valuable securities. If you were to sell these securities, you would get more than you paid for them because you own them at above market rates. So that's a very attractive feature and really a form of backup liquidity for you from this portfolio, which I'll get into in just a second. The asset allocation pie chart shows you the different types of securities that you're invested in. I mentioned the Treasury securities, which you do own a good percentage of. But then additional to that, our team is constantly talking with broker dealers around the country that are selling other types of fixed income products that fit both your investment policy and the California Government Code to be able to find some additional yield in different products, whether that's mortgage-backed securities or corporate bonds, government agency securities, commercial paper, whatever the case may be. And we also have a credit research team that is doing the fundamental analysis to make sure that we are comfortable with the credit worthiness of any individual issuer that we're buying for the portfolio. So we're extremely comfortable that you are going to be paid back on these investments. Now, the next page looks at the cash flow of the portfolio over the last few years. So I'll caveat this with the scale on the left is you can see it only starts at 30 million. So it looks like there's a lot more fluctuation in the portfolio than there really is. And that's intentional to try to show you some of the flows that we've seen over the last few years. So this portfolio was first invested in late 2022 with an initial deposit into the U.S. Bank custody account of $32.7 million. A few months later, there was an additional $3 million that came into the portfolio. So that's what was initially invested. Then you can see that just the trends of as the bars have generally gone up, that's income that's been received and reinvested into the portfolio. And then you see some dips there. Typically around the end of each calendar year over the last few years, the district has needed some additional cash flow. So there's been some points where we have investments that are mature, that I talk with Catherine or with Dan, and they let me know that, hey, don't reinvest that. We're going to need to supplement our cash flow. So we've seen some dips as you've tapped into the portfolio a little bit. And then over the last few years, spikes back up as you continue to just generate more income that's reinvested in the portfolio until at times you need cash again. Now you do see over the last few months a little bit more of a significant decline. I think this in 2025 there was about $4.5 million that came out of the portfolio to supplement your cash needs for various projects going on around town. So, but that's fine. That's what the portfolio is meant for. We're aware that you're going to be using it at different times, and we structure it to be able to provide that liquidity for you. Now the next page, and the last one I'll focus on here, looks at the investment income. So what does this all mean? What are we earning on it? And so what these bar graphs represent is the cash basis realized investment income. So this is real cash coming into the portfolio, either through the form of interest payments received on your investments, or when bonds mature and you recognize a realized capital gain, which would be the difference between what you paid for the security and what it matures at. So the combination of those is your total realized investment income. Going back to fiscal year 2023, when the portfolio was first invested, that was only for a partial year, generating about $440,000 of income. But as you were investing into that higher rate market, you started to reap the benefits of that over the last couple of years, jumping that up to 1.1 million in fiscal year 2024, up to almost 1.7 million in fiscal year 2025. And then through the first 6 months of the year, generating almost $1 million so far just through the first 6 months of this fiscal year. And then the darker blue shade on here is looking forward, the projections based only on the bonds that are currently in the portfolio, of the interest payments you would expect to receive and when you're going to receive them. So looking at another $655,000 through the remainder of this fiscal year, which will leave you up also in the $1.7 million range. And then more importantly, looking into the next couple of years, those are essentially baseline figures. That's already what you have booked into receiving if all of the maturities just come out and are spent and don't go back into the portfolio. But realistically, we are going to be able to reinvest some of these upcoming maturities. They will be reinvested and you'll generate additional income on top of these projections you're seeing here. So if this portfolio stays somewhere in this $30 to $32 million range, which it's at right now, I would expect that the next few years are going to be in that $1.2 to $1.4 million range of investment income. And then the more that we can keep in the portfolio right now, for a longer period, while the rates are still relatively high, the better for your budgetable income going forward. So the biggest variable in that is just going to be the size of the portfolio, to the extent you need to take some funds out for cash flow purposes for projects going on around the district. But that's the rundown on what's going on in the portfolio right now. The next several pages are our actual investment report. I believe you get this periodically as well. That's the detail of every bond that you own. I don't need to go through that right now unless you have any specific questions on it. I'm glad to get as detailed as you want on it, but I suspect that you've heard enough from me right now. So with that, I'll take any questions, comments, concerns, feedback that anybody has on the portfolio.
Thank you very much, Jim. Any board members have any queries or questions that they want to share with Mr. McCory?
Obviously, with the investigation of the Federal Reserve, it's a lot of uncertainty right now, but the question for us as policymakers is, how long can we continue to expect market rates to exceed inflation?
As far as your specific investments?
Well, right now we have a lot locked in at 4% and better,
Correct.
Which is likely to continue to exceed inflation. But as bonds continue to mature and they're being reinvested at market rates, it's likely that market rates are going to continue to fall and inflation is not going to continue to fall. So, at some point, even if the nominal dollar value of the portfolio is increasing, then the real value of that portfolio is decreasing. And that's something that we need to be looking at as we have an operating deficit, and we're going to need to, at some point, like the town has needed to find a way to balance the operating budget. So right now, because we have so much invested at above market rates,
Yeah.
and market rates are exceeding inflation, we can afford to draw that down some to offset the operating deficit, but that is not going to continue indefinitely into the future. So, I don't have the ability to spend 24 hours a day figuring out what is going on with federal monetary policy. So I wanted to ask, how much longer do we expect this favorable condition to continue?
It's a good question. I'll address that a couple different ways. One, as far as the types of investments you're in that could outpace inflation, you are limited by state law as far as the types of investments you can be in. So you essentially have to buy whatever the market is to that point, and that's all going to be relatively high quality fixed income securities. So you're subject to where monetary policy goes and where interest rate levels go on that. The other thing I'll say is that with the kind of the political pressure on the Fed to lower interest rates, and the idea for that is to try to make borrowing more cheap, specifically for mortgages. I think the potential effect of that is if the Fed succumbs to that and goes lower than maybe is otherwise appropriate, that you actually could see a jump in inflation, which would result in longer term rates going higher. And so even though we expect generally rates to continue on a lower trend, there is a possibility that the longer end could go higher if the market deems that the Fed has cut prematurely before they've actually made the proper progress on inflation. And in that case, you could start to see a jump up in longer term yields. And that's one of the reasons as well why I don't want to take the portfolio and take all $30 million and buy it all in 5-year investments right now, because we want to have some maturities coming due so that if there is a surprise spike upward in longer term rates, that you have essentially the ammo to be able to go back out there and participate in that market as rates might move higher. Now, I don't think that's maybe the likely scenario, but it's definitely a possible scenario in this. So hopefully some of that.
So now what we're seeing is shorter term yields exceed longer term yields, but if the market deems that the Fed has succumbed to pressure and cut rates prematurely, then we are likely to see that 4- and 5-year yields will exceed shorter term yields. And as long as we retain some sort of liquidity, then we can capture that and continue to at least keep pace with inflation.
That's correct. And that phenomenon has actually started to happen. We were in a couple of years of what we call an inverted yield curve, which is what you're referring to, where short-term yields are higher than longer-term yields. That has normalized, I guess would be the term, to where longer term yields are now slightly higher than short term yields, but it's still relatively flat. But there is the potential that does steepen back up at some point to where longer term yields are much higher, which is a normal shaped yield curve. That's just not where we've been for the last couple of years. But there's a lot of different variables that could affect how that looks going forward. And that's why with all the public entities that we manage money for, we are not necessarily trying to time or guess where rates are. I mean, we have some opinions, but we're not trying to time the market to any extent. We're trying to be diversified and manage risk for your portfolios. And we think by having a distribution of asset classes, a distribution of maturities, properly watching your cash flow, that's the appropriate way to manage public funds, in our view.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a quick, yes.
I just had a quick question. It's kind of related to that. I know that people have talked about the inverted yield curve as being kind of unusual over time, but let's say over the past 30 years, and the last few years have been that way, but what's been more typical over that?
There's definitely periods when that happens, and it's usually before the Fed starts to cut short-term rates. So it's generally a lot of times the Fed or the market is leading the Fed, meaning that investors are going to be looking at their longer-term anticipation for overall growth or for what inflation is going to be doing. And essentially the market's telling the Fed, hey, we think it's time for you to start cutting rates. And so that's what we've seen the last couple of years. And we saw it, it wasn't so much in 2020 because that COVID was just a shock to the markets, but we saw it again, prior to the rate cuts in late 08, 09. Where the market starts to expect some slowdown, starts to expect lower pressure on inflation, slower growth, and it gets ahead of the Fed going lower. And so essentially market participants are willing to go out and take a little bit lower rate on a 5-year, for instance, than you could get in an overnight money market fund, because you were projecting that overnight money market fund to start going down. And so you're having to reinvest that every day. And so to hedge yourself against that, you go take out what you can and lock that in for the longer period. And that was the environment we got into when we started investing this portfolio. And that's as attractive as that 470 was when we started investing this portfolio, you could get 5% overnight. And so we're thinking, why would you do that? Now we're starting to see that happen when overnights are at 3.5, but your portfolio is still well above 4% because of that effect of locking those longer term rates in. You're welcome.
So, Mr. McCoy, as your firm monitors the situation as we continue throughout this calendar year, if you see something that is an alarming trend or something like that, would you be amenable to not only work with our staff, but maybe if necessary, we have you give a presentation to our finance committee, which meets throughout the year?
Absolutely. We're glad to make presentations whenever requested for any of our clients. We also, if there is significant events in the economy, like you're suggesting, we regularly are putting out webinars and email releases to all of our clients, so the folks here that are on our distribution list are constantly being updated. And if it affects specifically any investments in your portfolio, we'll definitely reach out and have conversations about what we recommend doing with that. But we, like I said, our credit team is always monitoring the ongoing creditworthiness of these issuers. Right now, we don't feel there's anything to be worried about with as far as the types of bonds you own. So the only thing would really be just surprise movements in interest rates, but that's really, I think we diversify that away by having that maturity distribution in the portfolio, and then just the constant conversation that we have with the folks here about the upcoming cash flows to make sure that we don't have surprise cash needs as far as needing to sell investments from the portfolio.
Right, we appreciate that.
And one thing I was going to mention too is, we have regular reports, monthly reports, but especially with cash flow issues, I think we've been chatting with you like probably 2 or 3 times a month over the past few months, just to make sure that we have a good understanding of what's coming due, and making sure that we have adequate resources for some of the projects that we have. So board members may know we get basically two paychecks a year, 3 paychecks a year, basically from the county from tax revenue. And so that creates some cash flow challenges that we have to manage well. And you guys have been very responsive, so appreciate that.
Appreciate that.
Just a quick question out of curiosity for both of you. Throughout a typical month, how often do you, in between you and Dan or you and Catherine, communicate with regard to not only cash flow, but opportunities that you see that you may want, for your comfort, may want to pass by Dan or Catherine?
Well, one of the things is we have a discretionary agreement with the district, which means that we're able to make investment decisions on your behalf. So
Right.
We don't run necessarily every trade by the district previous to us making it. What we do is have these regular conversations so that we talk generally about what our strategy is, make sure that you have the cash flow to allow for that strategy, and then essentially Dan and his team say, okay, that sounds good, go do that. And so then as we do trades, we send them emails every time we do a trade that show them what happened. They are able to then log into our system and the U.S. Bank custody system to verify everything that we told them was going to happen settles correctly, so that they can see that everything balances to the penny. All of these dollars are accounted for. They have online access to our reporting system every day where they can verify that. And then, as Dan mentioned, we send a detailed monthly investment report as well that is also reconciled with the custody account. So there's lots of regular communication, and then regular calls and meetings as often as needed to discuss the projects and cash flow situation going on. So I would say we talk regularly and communicate regularly.
So with that in mind, between you and our general manager, how often do you think you have to communicate and come up with a strategy decision throughout a calendar year? How frequently? Maybe 4 or 5 times at the most?
Oh, it's been more than that.
Yeah, lately it's been more than that.
Yeah, I'll put it this way. Like when we have, there's that one diagram that came up that showed the years that the buckets, essentially think of these as buckets, right? That there's a year 1 bucket, 0 to 1 year, and those things are coming due. And then there's ones that go further out. So for each year, the ones that we pay the most attention to is if we know that there are projects that are increasing with activity, or there's a delay with the state for whatever reason, on a reimbursement related to a grant, that's when we start looking at the cash flow. So it's kind of looking at our balances and our upcoming payments that we need to make, but also trying to anticipate what's coming up. Or do we have a big project coming up that we need some cash on hand? So I'd say, especially now with Catherine's here. So now because we're getting close to when the tax revenue gets dropped in, or it did just last month, there's a lot of chatter that we have around those dates to make sure that we have adequate resources for it. So I think we talked 4 or 5 times in probably the last 2 months.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
or at least email communication talking about that, trying to fine tune it.
And I think that's accurate with all of our clients. So when when you're doing the vision of what the next several months look like as far as cash flow, that's where we start to have more conversations to make sure that we're buttoned up with a strategy to be able to meet those needs. And we communicate any changes in overall strategy, but I'll tell you, I mean, our overall strategy, we tinker with it, but we don't make wholesale changes to it because we think a consistent, diversified approach is really the best way to do this. So we don't make huge changes to our general strategy. It's really more about accommodating cash flow for you.
Well, that's good to know. I appreciate you guys sharing that with us. And occasionally you may want to do a deep dive with our finance committee once in a while too.
Glad to do that.
Any other questions from the board members? Well, thank you very much for that detailed update. It provides some level of comfort for me as one
Good.
member of this board. So
I appreciate you having me here tonight. Good to see everyone.
thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Steph, does that conclude our presentations this evening? That's the agenda.
Special presentations, yes.
Okay, so we're going to move on then to the next item on tonight's agenda, which is item 2, and that is what's called public comment. Public comment is an agenda item that affords you, attendees of the public, if you want to discuss something with this board that's not on tonight's agenda, this is your opportunity to do so. Is there anybody who wishes to come forward and discuss anything with the board this evening that's not on tonight's agenda? Come on up and press the button and speak into the microphone. Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Donna Bristol, and I have lived in Magalia for 35 years. Money has continually been taken out of my property taxes for a park. There is no park. I understand that you're wanting to put up a rec building on the Lake Ridge Park property. I want to know why you are wasting our money. We are simple people. Personally, I would just like to have a gazebo like the one at Billy Park. There are already 2 available buildings to be considered as rec buildings in Magalia. I also understand that the money entrusted to you, that you have been using it to make changes to the plans. I would like to see a public announcement or showing of the budget and the redesigned plot map. And how many times have our plans gone back to the drawing board? And at what cost? It has been shared that without a building, you would lose funding. Nonsense. Prove it. It has been shared that without a building, you can't build a park. Prove it. Do you really think that just spouting this stuff, people would just buy it? You are wasting space for what the public actually needs. The public needs an accounting of every single penny that has been spent on this project. It seems apparent to me that this project is already $1 million over budget, from what I understand. You are working very hard to ensure that there will never be enough money to even give the people and families of Magalia a park. Thus, it is very unfair that I understand We may be getting more taxes taken out of our property taxes for a park. And that seems rather unfair since this board has not been reliable with the use of our funds. Personally, I'd like to tell you if there isn't a park, I want my money back. Thank you.
Thank you for that input, ma'am. Just quick question. Have you taken the time to even meet with our staff and do more of a detailed discussion on this matter at all? I mean, I appreciate your comments tonight, but I'm just wondering, have you had that opportunity with our staff to look, they can provide you a lot of factual information that, you know, that you could use? Beg your pardon?
Yes, and I won't say.
So you have met with our district manager and our assistant? No? Because they're the ones in the know. I don't know who among staff you've been talking to, but anyway, I'm just asking. That's if you've afforded that opportunity or not. So just hearing some of the comments you shared tonight, which we appreciate, some of that is not accurate, quite frankly, and that's no reflection on you at all. And some of it is. But it'd be nice to, you know, for you to have that opportunity to look at the facts in total. So thank you. Any other board members want to? All right, next item on the agenda this evening is item 3, consent agenda, of which there are 1, 2, 3, 5 separate items on the consent agenda. Staff, is there anything on the consent agenda that at this time needs to be pulled and acted upon separately from the rest of the agenda items on consent?
Yes, I'd like to pull item 3.1 and 3.4.
3.1 and 3.4. We have concurrence of the board for that to be acted upon separately? Okay, so the remainder of the consent agenda items is 3.2, payment of bills and disbursements. 3.3, an update on a fixed asset. Apparently a laptop was replaced. And 3.5, an update on the neighbor to neighbor sub-agreement amendments that are recommended and proposed for consent adoption. So board members, do you have any questions on those other 3 consent items?
No questions. And Mr. Chair, I motion to approve items 3.2, 3.3, and 3.5 on the consent.
Okay, we have a motion that's been made on the floor. Is there a second? Is there a second? I'll second the motion. Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Director John Stonebreaker,
Aye.
Vice Chairperson Steve Rodwick,
Aye.
and Chairperson Alma Green. Motion carries with 3 ayes.
Okay, now the 2 items that were pulled individually, first one is the 3.1 board minutes. Madam Clerk, do you bring something to our attention on that matter, please?
Yes, under adjournment, I had put down that we were adjourning to the next scheduled board meeting for January 11th, and it's supposed to be January 14th, which is today.
So you're recommending that we adopt that set of minutes with that amendment?
Yes, unless anyone has anything further.
Okay. Is there anything else amongst the board other than that one correction that needs to be entertained on the minutes of the last meeting? Hearing none, we should entertain a motion action on this. Does anybody want to make a motion?
Mr. Chair, motion to approve item 3.1 on consent.
As corrected. Okay. Second.
Okay, motion's been made to approve the minutes as corrected and seconded. Madam Clerk, we have a roll call vote, please.
Director John Stonebreaker,
Aye.
Vice Chairperson Steve Rodwick,
Aye.
and Chairperson Alma Green.
Aye.
Motion carries with 3 ayes.
Very good. Moving on. The other consent agenda item that was pulled and need to be acted upon individually is item 3.4, PRPD Board of Directors regular and committee meetings.
Yes, I just wanted to point out that The attachment was correct, but in the staff report, the committee meetings were a little jumbled. So I wanted to clarify that the finance committee will happen the third Tuesday at 1 p.m., which is what it's been. The personnel committee will also stay the same, third Tuesday at 3 p.m., but the recreation and park committee meeting will be the third Thursday at 1 p.m. Yeah, no, sorry, sorry, I don't have the original one or the new one in front of me. I gave them all out.
The new states the Recreation and Park Committee is the third Tuesday at 1
Tuesday at
p.m.
1, so right before the personnel committee, correct. That is the correct version.
But the finance committee is on the third Thursday, is it not?
Yes.
Okay.
So the finance and the personnel are the same as last year. And then the only one that is changing is the rec and park, which is right before the personnel committee at 1 p.m. on the third Tuesday.
Okay, thank you. Now, aren't there some other corrections that you needed to?
I
Right.
was just gonna point out, it is, if you start on page 12, the correct dates are lined up, I think, on there. That's just the report that's inconsistent.
My page 11 is where all these meeting
Oh,
dates are shown.
That's the report. The actual next page is the standing committees. That's our,
The guidelines.
the guidelines and the
Yes,
staff.
I'm talking about the regular board meetings in the staff report. That's part of this
Yes,
package.
sorry.
There are some corrections there. I'd
Yes.
like to, as your chair, you to bring the attention of the entire board.
Yes. Okay. So, I had put, sorry, I don't have the one that you guys have in front of you, but I made them.
You have a typo relative to the June board meeting that
Yes.
says 10 p.m. at night.
And it's 10 a.m.
It should be intended to be 10 a.m. Thank you.
And then the September meeting,
The chair has asked you to make that 3 p.m. in the
3
afternoon and not
yes.
10 in the morning.
yep, 3 p.m.
And I don't know if the board has any qualms with this, but this is something we want to try this calendar year to see how it works. And if it's beneficial, we might see some efficiencies of staff time and that type of thing. But we're trying to select months that normally would not be a problem necessarily, maybe slower months throughout the year.
I have some concerns about this, specifically the change of the November meeting to second Tuesday. So that is both the supervisors meeting and the Paradise Pines meeting, which is McGillier's only form of self-governance.
No. The board meetings are always going to be on the Wednesdays.
So because the Wednesday will be the Veterans Day on the 11th of November, so the last time this occurred in 2020, the PRPD board meeting was moved to Thursday the 12th. And here the recommendation is to move it to Tuesday the 10th, which is a bit of a conflict.
Well, that's a good catch. That's why this is on the agenda and that's why we're discussing it. I'd recommend it not be that Tuesday, not the same
as the town
meeting as
council.
another governmental body, but it'd be a different day of the week.
Okay.
And we need to select that tonight if possible. So we,
Yeah, it'd be great to select it tonight.
I would suggest to the board to, instead of Tuesday, to make it Thursday, the 12th at 6 p.m.
now,
Unless there's conflict.
so that'd be right after Veterans Day,
Right.
right?
Right. That's what was done in 2020. That would be my recommendation as well.
I think that would be wise, staff, that we do that. Do we have concurrence, all three of the board members here tonight?
Concur.
Excellent. We can-
Well,
But
I think there was a reason why it was moved to Tuesday, not Thursday,
well,
and not Wednesday. Obviously,
I didn't know
Yeah.
what the two
just
of you
just
decide.
toss out a couple of options. I think one thing that could, what we've done in the past too, is just shift it to the following week as well. Keep it on the same day. It's not perfect, right? We're gonna have one every so often. Veterans Day is gonna be the one holiday. It conflicts with our date. We're agreeable to any change that works for board members on that. I think that the idea was just to have it kind of pick, obviously not that Wednesday because that's a holiday, but either way is fine.
Well,
Thursday.
the intent as your chair was to try to have this set and lock it in for the entire year so we can
Yeah.
get on various calendars that are useful for various parties and other agencies and so forth. The idea maybe Veterans Day falling on a Wednesday, why not just shift it to the following week? Is that?
And that could be another thing. If PID typically has their meeting on the third Thursday, but they've moved theirs to 9 a.m. in the morning.
So it's third Wednesday, actually.
I'm sorry, I meant Wednesday. It lines up with ours. It's on a Wednesday, but they have theirs in the morning, so
Yeah,
there's
this
conflict.
would still be an evening meeting. So,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that's probably doable, gentlemen, if you're okay with that.
Either the following day or the following week on the traditional Wednesday. I'm amenable to either.
So we have no conflicts on either of those dates.
Okay,
So-
and that, then why don't we do this? Gentlemen, we approve this consent agenda item as discussed with those amendments and those changes, and leave it up to staff to do a deep dive and pick either the Thursday after Veterans Day or the following Wednesday after the week of Veterans Day.
Recommend actually that perhaps we put it as a motion with those amendments, but I think it makes the most sense if we could shift it to lock in the Wednesday and just move it a week from there.
We're fine with that.
Okay,
What date?
so
is it?
that would be the 18th, Wednesday, the 18th, 6 p.m.
So my other question is, why was the 10 a.m. start time chosen? I can understand wanting to have certain meetings during daytime to see if that brings in different public participation or if it's easier on staff. Just curious why the choice had been to have one of the meetings in the morning, and so the chair has recommended the September meeting also be in the afternoon, as was recommended for March.
Yeah, I think, and the one that, and maybe I misunderstood the chair's statement, but we were looking at the summer meeting being during the day because of the heat, basically.
During the day is not the concern. The question is why was the morning start time chosen rather than another afternoon start time?
With my recollection was this is more of a trial, and we wanted to
Yeah.
try two different times to see what kind of outcome turns out from that.
I think it's more of an experiment for us. In our original bylaws, our meetings start at 7 p.m.
That's
and that
right.
was just not really workable for any party. So we shifted some years ago. It's been a decade, do you think, directors? That was shifted to 6. And so I think I know that, Board of Supervisors, PID has shifted to morning meetings. It's just an experiment to look at what kind of participation we have. And it may be the type of thing that maybe that works better in summer, but it doesn't the other times of the year. So it's just data collection for us and trying different times.
Okay, so anybody want to make a motion that we approve it subject to all those changes we just concurred with?
Would also recommend having the regular meeting agenda order revised to have roll call rather than roll cal.
What?
I think that was the typo that.
Well, that's
that
just
Sarah-
from the staff report. That's,
Yeah, but that's not, okay, so there,
yeah, I'm asking for a motion based on our discussion more than anything else, and the
okay,
changes. we made.
so. Okay. Move to set the committee meetings and the board of directors meetings with the corrections noted. Having the November meeting on the 18th and the Recreation Park Committee meeting moved from the 4th to the 3rd Tuesday. Is that clear enough?
It's an excellent motion. Thank you very much. Is there a second?
Okay. So I'm really sorry, John, will you just repeat it for me?
That's to repeat. So my motion would be to set the committee meetings and the regular meetings as stated, with the November meeting on 11/18, Wednesday the 18th, and the Recreation Park Committee meeting from the 4th to the 3rd Tuesday.
Second.
May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director John Stonebreaker,
Aye.
Vice Chairperson Steve Rodwick,
Aye.
Chairperson Alma Green.
Aye.
Motion carries with 3 ayes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Moving on, item 4 on tonight's agenda, committee reports, of which we have none this evening. Item 5, district old business, there's nothing agendized tonight, so we'll move on to district new business. Item 6.1, letter of agreement with Site Logic IQ to provide energy services. District Manager, you want to give us a?
No, I'll take this off a little bit. So we've been working for several months now with Site IQ and Christy and her team to look at some of our sites to put some, see if there's a viable package to work on some energy efficiency, which could include, LED lights, but also solar and some opportunities for electric vehicle charging stations and so forth. So you made at least 2 trips out to visit our sites along with their team recently. And I think there's some urgency on this because of the some of the incentives go away here shortly. And Christy will be able to discuss that a bit. Oh, by the way, if you're looking at the report, this is out of a regular order on our numbering. It starts on page 16. The next item is before it. But we did have an agreement just recently this month provided to us after their site visit. And that's being reviewed by our attorney. We did have a couple of questions regarding some of the terms. And it sounds like they are agreeable, and we're given direction tonight. We'd work with the attorney and SiteLogic IQ to go through that. On the line too, we also have Dr. Eddie Jordan, who can answer questions from a technical nature. He's the vice president, I believe, of the company. And Christy can run through the proposal and some of those items that we've talked about. And then I could come back and fill in some of the gaps on where we're going from here.
Well, thank you. But before Christy starts, just for my clarification, if I heard you correctly, the revised document was received prior to the meeting then?
No,
Still has not been
we're-
received.
we have had received comments from them. Our lawyer hasn't completely reviewed that. She did review the original letter. So that's why the action tonight would be authorization, not approval of it. So want to have that authorization if that was the desire of the board.
So if the board authorizes you to proceed on that letter of agreement, is that also empowering you to eventually approve it without any further board action?
If that's the direction. And Christy could give some of the timelines that are coming up here. And also the obligations here are a little bit different with this than the forthcoming, what would be a forthcoming, if there's a project, a forthcoming agreement. So this is a little bit lighter version of that, but we want to make sure that it was not restricting our board's authority or ability to review that. So that was the general part of our concerns on it.
That's what I thought. Okay, all right, well, appreciate that. Thank you. I think, Christy, you want to come up and welcome, by the way, and we'd like to hear what you have to share.
All right, a little taller here. Thank you so much, Chair and members of the board, as well as the staff who have been incredible to work with over the last few months. We are thrilled as a very local and regionally centered firm working with local counties, cities, and a number of very small and rural special districts, including a number of local tribal governments as well. But as a company, we really are founded on the core principles. What we're working with the district here is improving the district's critical infrastructure and public infrastructure, guaranteeing that safety and long-term outcomes with budget neutral projects, delivering not only energy conservation, but ultimately, as we all live in PG&E land locally, and even with the oncoming CCA, community aggregate, Pioneer Community Energy, will be saving residents and businesses and even districts such as yourselves on utility costs lightly this next year. We know too that the continued increase on utility costs is hundreds of thousands to your current district and facilities, and knowing with continued growth, the beautiful community facing services at your aquatic center, at your ballparks, at Lake Ridge Park, and those that will serve generations to come. These would be those energy efficiency improvements, whether it be any savings that can be delivered, whether it be HVAC or lighting measures, a battery backup, for instance. We, of course, are in timeline crunch since the passing of the Big Beautiful Bill. that was what Dan was mentioning when it comes to renewable energy incentives. Sadly, with that bill, we're seeing solar and battery funding that typically pays anywhere from 20 to 50% of a project. Its costs, those are going away. So we do have a window of time as we continue to work with not only your community and district and neighboring counties, working against the clock, if you will, to get some of these projects accomplished. Within the LOA, and as we had completed the site walk, I was last up here in the snowstorm and the heavy fog, but living here locally, it was an incredible opportunity to walk each site with your park supervisor, but we visited obviously all 8 that are listed here, and we'll look at all of the utility usage, any of the savings, and of course the letter of agreement just enables us, it's the nod from the board to effectively for us to complete a preliminary feasibility study, come back to you as a body and to the community with proposed savings and measures, whether that be carport solar at the new community center, whether that be a shared EV infrastructure that may be in collaboration potentially with the town and or county to really connect the ridge as a key community and bring our access for tourism for visitors as well as residents deliverables. So as Dan mentioned, this is just the very first step, but really is the promise on our end to come back to the board with a proposal and savings opportunities and what that would look like long term. All of the projects that we complete, whether that be solar, EV, battery, as well as water and wastewater infrastructure throughout the region and state. Those projects, as with this one, we work to be Government Code 4217, which are self-funded energy efficiency and conservation projects. So they have to be budget neutral and or deliver and guarantee those savings over the life of the equipment, which is usually, up to and beyond 30 years. So as you have already been very strong stewards, as we heard tonight, not only of the district's funds, but especially on, the sustainability and long-term resiliency of the district. We look forward to exploring all of those opportunities with you and being that long-term partner.
Board members have any questions? So Christie, relative to the agreement?
I have one, and this might be getting a little far down in the weeds,
Sure.
but I was looking at attachment B, periodic information request. Would your feasibility study include such things as gardening equipment, blowers, mowers, things that we use gasoline now, but we can, with the increase in battery technology, could conceivably go electric?
We don't typically go to the nuts and bolts of actual maintenance equipment, but I know that we could definitely, provide some recommendations. We have a full in-house, over 500-person certificated and engineering team that specifically specialize in clean energy and infrastructure, but I'm sure can connect with some great resources as well as recommendations.
I know one of the questions that came up was that you posed to us was, what would be our projected needs for charging stations for our own equipment?
Yes.
And so that might be coming up kind of indirectly, but I know there's some mandates that the state's going to require for some of that stuff coming down. But I think some of that we're just finding out ourselves. Maybe your team could help
Fantastic
answer some of the
point. And
questions.
maybe I'll have Dr. Jordan chime in if he's able to on that point. I'll just start off by denoting you're absolutely right. And it's that uphill battle that many of actually all of my rural communities, I have all of our northern 30 counties, and they're all very rural, some very remote and disadvantaged with, a very aged infrastructure. But the mandate for clean fleet and EV vehicles, even for a small district like yourselves, or even some of our very small fire districts, some water districts up here, that requirement is cumbersome, and most districts don't even have the funding to buy electric vehicles. However, we would be able to meet the requirements for all the new buildings and facilities, and also make recommendations as well that may be in collaboration with other partners such as Enterprise Mobility and some of their leased options. So then the district isn't having to purchase new vehicles. It's more of a lease, and they handle the ongoing maintenance and costs. But Dr. Jordan, if you are on the line, if you want to touch on the EV fleet and infrastructure, some of the mandates there.
Yeah, that's part of this project. We will look at, especially with the new facility where you're going to be putting a lot of your vehicles that's going to be built in the next few years, making sure the infrastructure is there to add EV charging chargers for those future EV vehicles. We understand that you purchased new vehicles not too long ago, and you probably have a good 5 to 10 years of life left there, but it'd be best to put in that infrastructure now while you're doing the new construction than to wait for a later period.
And it's the same on, for instance, new builds of all schools, right? New builds of community centers. The state mandate is that you have to include a specific number of EV charging sites and stalls with new facilities. So it's one where we've been highly successful at garnering funds, finding those incentives and available funding to basically, layer that funding to make the projects pencil out. For instance, the California Energy Commission has, Caltrans has one that just rolled out, as well as EVIP. So we are when I say we're that long-term partner, we truly mean it in our heart of hearts, because we know that by delivering as many grants, incentives, or as we mentioned, the ITC credits for some of the solar and infrastructure battery as well, we look to maximize the funding, leveraging your current grants to make these projects feasible and self-funded.
So these mandates that the state has adopted, they're unfunded mandates, are they not?
They are, sadly, one of the
So your
100 bills that
organizations like yours is scrambling to help clients like us potentially find incentives, as you will, or quote unquote supposedly grant money made for that purpose, but that's a crapshoot at times.
It's a challenge, but I will tell you,
disrespectfully at all. It's just, that's a reality. What I need to understand is you mentioned earlier in your presentation that the clock is closing, so to speak, or the time is closing, but I didn't hear an actual closure date or anything like that relative to these incentives and so forth. Can you share that for the benefit of the board?
Sure. And there are a few different milestone dates and project dates. Dr. Jordan, if you have the specifics on battery versus solar on that project.
Yeah, sure. So solar tax incentive, or the ITC incentive, which, because you're not a taxable entity, would actually be a check from the Treasury Department. That is set to expire on July 3rd. To meet that requirement, well, let me step back. That's going to pay for roughly 40%, I believe, of your project because of the area where you currently live. You get up to 40% of that paid for by the federal government. In order to meet that July 3rd deadline, you would have to have had spent 5% of the project cost on equipment and have that equipment delivered, sitting in a warehouse somewhere, to meet that requirement. For the battery storage, we do have a couple of years on the battery storage beyond this year. So that's something we'll explore, as well as battery storage. The utilities right now are kind of changing their rate schedules so they can claim that they're not increasing rates, where your generation charge is not actually going to go up a whole lot, but then the demand and fixed charges are going up significantly, sometimes 25%.
Which nets out too.
So that's where battery storage is starting to become a much more viable option for districts like yourself.
And really, Eddie just nailed it on the head, right? So while distribution and other charges continue to actually not bounce up and down, they continue to increase. the goal of the battery projects, right, is for you to be able to charge up during sunny hours and high use times, right, and shed when you're not. But with that, providing your district sustainability, right, and local control of your usage and costs. And so that's where, you know, our expertise comes in, and we'll be able to model that and return. Of course, this is very preliminary with the letter of agreement, but we promise to return after a full assessment and some real solid solutions and that funding pathway on how to accomplish the project and garner as many of the available funds that we can, as well as those grants and windows that are closing mid-March, as well as the ITC, as Eddie mentioned, in July.
I was going to mention this. That's probably a good segue for this, but perhaps you or Dr. Jordan can explain this. But, you know, basically the encapsulation of the project is there's this first stage on the audit and looking at our resources that we have available, our properties, see what the best recommendations might be. And then that would come back to the board as a more full package with specifics. Do you want to address that or how that process works? I think that would help a lot on knowing what they're signing out for tonight.
Yes, and we're very on point there in that in our return, it would be a full presentation to the board, to the community at a future meeting date. And with that, you know, would have options as far as funding. You can, a lot of times our rural communities and districts will even look at a phased approach, right? High priority locations and or fundings available right here, right now for this. We'll start there and then look at phasing in the others at a later date. So when we do return, it would be a full, you know, presentation with slides, with imagery, with some helioscopes so you can see what it would really look like. You know, preliminary engineering designs on what carport solar would look like at the community center. It'd be shaded, it'd be covered during rain, snow, and so forth, and how EV charging integration, you know, would look like. And a lot of times the funding for EV chargers will also, you know, require solar. So it's a win-win in that it can help offset your current facilities usage while also providing that public benefit. And public-facing chargers also can be a revenue source. We were with Pioneer Community Energy today with another county client, and they have, it's really also a model where it is either neutral funding and or a revenue source, because all those folks with EVs and or all of the districts and public agencies that are required to have clean fleets now with the mandate, they need to plug and charge somewhere. So for instance, your maintenance yard, right, may be a viable location if you have one or two fleet vehicles. They'd be charging up there and or at Lake Ridge Park, at if you looked at the Aquatic Center, Rec Center, and potentially your community center. And those can be, you know, charging locations where guests coming up for law enforcement academy graduations or performances at the Performing Arts Center. They're coming, you want folks to come, plug, play, and stay. So there's some revenue available there. So
Very good. So assuming we proceed tonight and authorize the district manager to finalize and execute the necessary letter of agreement, when is your estimated coming back time for the full presentation? You know, approximately. I mean, I'm not going to hold you to it, but
yeah, we can typically complete that preliminary engineering and scope if pretty efficiently and effectively. So I would estimate, and Dr. Jordan may strangle me through the line, but likely within the next month and a half, so that we, you know, really stay on timeline for potential funding, and to ensure that, you know, we're working down a pathway that's, you know, at the board's direction, and that would best serve the larger community.
One thing I think, Christy, that you might be able to explain better than I is the fee that's listed in there, that it's $25K if the district opts to not follow up with the projects, but if there is a project, then that would be folded into it. Do you want to just
Yes,
cover
the-
that?
That engineering and development fee, of course, is waived. We're not a consultant. We are a design build energy company and top tier in California and nationally accredited. With that, that we've actually never charged that fee because it is, the onus is on us, as I mentioned, to return back with a viable, feasible project and the funding pathway to accomplish that project and deliver that savings to the district. But if, for instance, there is very clear language in there. So if the district, if we came back after doing full engineering and full feasibility and site plans and outlays and started, even grant or funding application submittals, and the district said, you know what, we've changed our mind. We're going in a completely different direction. Thanks so much for your time, but we're, going to halt or walk away at this time. It would only be for those engineering costs and that investment over that year of work that would be completely done in good faith.
And limited to 25,000.
Yes. But we don't bill. So all of this is at no capital cost to the district. We don't charge for our preliminary feasibility and engineering work up front.
Probably a question for Dan more than anybody.
Sure.
Can we get this calendared, with regard to the incentives, to incorporate the shop in there, even though it's just in preliminary design?
Yeah, that's actually one, I think it's on the list.
I did add it, but that's a great
Yeah.
point because it was one of the for the
Can we
maintenance.
purchase equipment for a building that doesn't exist?
Yes, because we have 8 other facilities,
Okay.
and knowing that that carport solar and whether it's the panels or whether it's the cost of steel, right, and the upper infrastructure, but any and all of that equipment, yes, the district would have the ability to do so. But we did include the new maintenance yard and storage. And most excitingly, which may end up being your first phase, because it is so extremely viable, and we know the energy savings will be there at the community center, and what broad use and visitation that would have. So we'll be looking, obviously, and hard targeting the current facilities, but then later phases would likely be the aquatic center, recreation building, the maintenance yard, and of course, Lake Ridge. We've got a couple preliminary ideas and solutions for that location as we've been coordinating with the staff and team on that.
And some of those items, for example, a lot of the new construction requirements are that there's a certain amount of area that, obviously is devoted to solar, but also shading, for example. So shaded parking.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a solar array above that, it could provide both. It could provide covered parking and solar and even charging underneath. Kind of interesting, I think, when we looked at some of the preliminary stuff for a community center, which is a brand new building, it has solar on it, but it may have some more additional capacity, and then certainly has a large parking lot that could, provide some additional solar output and some services for folks that may want to park and plug in and have that as a amenity that may be there and provide some shaded parking for others.
Yep. And offset, our utility costs are, as I mentioned, only going to continue to rise. So knowing with that capacity there, with the funding that's available, and the open broad space for that equipment would be able to offset the district's current usage as well as, additional future usage potentially. All right. Thank you.
So I have a couple questions. One is, how did this firm come to the attention of the district? Were one of their other clients to give them a recommendation, obviously we got a recommendation for a meter from one of their other clients?
Yep, surely. So we had connected, well, for years, I've been serving and working up on the ridge and throughout Butte County. And that first started with the Sierra Pacific Foundation years ago, and then assisting as well with some grant getting for the Magalia Community Park and the disc golf, especially after the recovery. We've had legislative tours up here bringing up CSAC, which is all of our California County administrators and supervisors. So we recently, I think that was a year and a half ago, had toured the parks in Billy Park. But most recently, excuse me, was down at the California State Association's Parks and Recs conference. We are not only with the county associations, premier partners, but with the California Special Districts, so CSDA Association partner, and had connected at the conference earlier this year. And they were doing highlights on energy efficiency projects, conservation. And so a few of our clients, Riverbank, Bear Mountain, Rexham Park, even as recent as Santa Cruz with their baseball diamonds and shading over the bleachers. I think Kingsburg and a few others were there, connecting and sharing references and referrals. And Dan reached out and shared, actually, Paradise was recognized for your new parks, beautiful new facilities, playgrounds, and real access and rebuilding the community here. And it was, I think, in one of those conversations that it came up on, us serving as a top rural community, but especially in parks, recreation, and city facilities.
My other question is specifically with regards to the community center on Nunnally. How would this firm's work interface with Peter McBride's work?
Yeah, I can address that. I think one of the things that's a little bit different, we're going to have him focus on the interior and contents and sort of along that line, overall energy efficiency. So I think there's a dividing line there. And we've he's working on a revised scope of work for us, but it's mostly going to be on the contents and kind of like the attributes inside the building. So that's I think the dividing line between. He won't be doing the exterior solar.
Okay, understood. But we know that his firm focuses on energy efficiency and sustainability. So if some of the work that this firm will be doing is also energy efficiency as opposed to like energy generation, I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't going to be any stepping on one another's toes.
I don't think so, because I think you guys are,
Very
you're not
different.
looking at the kind of interior daylighting of it or some of the lighting or that type of fixture.
Correct. Yeah. And on that note, we really, so he's definitely got the interior side covered, and with it being a new building, that's definitely not going to need, new HVAC or heating components, for instance. But we'd be looking more at offsetting the utility usage with the solar and or battery backup, because that facility is a very viable, strong location that could be a Red Cross evacuation center, a PG&E licensed heating, cooling center, for instance. And so we would look at battery backup to make that more of a resiliency hub for the community, as well as the EV infrastructure. And we're, again, national construction firm, and with that being our expertise, definitely would coordinate through and through with the staff and with the local contractor on that.
Do board members have any other queries or questions at this point in time? Hearing nothing.
I would ask, that before we choose to go with this particular firm, were there any other contenders who spoke to district staff and district staff chose to go with this firm?
It'd be interesting to hear what your competitors are, but it's kind of a different model than I think what we've typically done. So usually I think the way that the approach would be is you would typically do an energy audit on your facilities buildings. They might come up with a laundry list and then you put that out to a bid process. And so I think we're under the changes in the law, which I think you explain way better than I can, that they are allowing more design build for districts relate to energy and conservation work. So they've kind of streamlined that a bit with the idea of trying to help streamline that and make these projects happen. So it's a little bit different process. It's not there wasn't an RFP put out for this work. And you could probably speak to what your competitors are like out there. I think it's a different landscape than what
Yes.
is.
Very much so. And it's the Government Code 4217. And that is it was addressed through a Senate bill over 25 years ago. But really, it's that preferred procurement method for efficiency and streamlining energy projects. So it has to ensure we have to follow under not only the accreditations, but the deliverables of being able to performance guarantee that energy conservation, that generation and savings to the district. And so that is where over, 30 years and our expertise as a firm at a national level, but especially at the state level, where our service to rural communities, but especially districts and counties with, very high and increasing utility bills and the on-site regional and local staff to accomplish the design build.
So I agree that there is urgency in getting this work started while the incentives are still available. And I just want to make sure that the district is getting the best deal we can get. So
Absolutely. And Eddie, I don't know if you had anything to add there on the design build ledge, or if we've covered.
Oh, yeah, with the design build. And also it's a pretty open book process with us. So we're going to provide you with all of the numbers and the details for each item. We really don't hide anything there. Our goal is ultimately to build a project, and that was the purpose of that legislation. Is a lot of studies were being done for many, many years and just sitting on the desk of a lot of these districts and government entities to now allow a design build approach where you can more hard focus on measures that will actually work and pay for themselves. And that's what our focus is going to be is just targeting those measures that make the most sense for the district instead of just doing the study.
Yep. And then being that NAESCO accredited firm, we have the in-house full engineer and maintenance team. So with any and all of our projects, right, it's that warranty and guarantee for the district, and also the option to have ongoing O&M, because we know most districts may not have an energy manager, right, or may not have a full engineer on staff. However, your team and district will have access to their data, to that performance, and we're that long-term. We're not a build contractor. It's not a traditional RFP would be put out a bid for, putting up a solar panel. It goes out to bid, it gets built, and they're gone. Ours is long-term local government expertise, specifically for public agencies and 4217 projects, so that savings stays with the district versus individual costs over the long term.
Okay, is that pretty much?
that satisfies my curiosity. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you, Director Stonebreaker. At this point in time, we're going to open up this agenda item to the floor. Is there anybody in the audience who wishes to speak to this new business agenda item? Judging from the silence, apparently not, so we'll bring it back to the board. The recommendation before the board this evening is we have reviewed and we have thoroughly discussed, and we're being asked to potentially authorize the district manager to sign the letter of agreement with the consultant firm. And that's with the understanding once that's finalized and agreed upon. So what's the pleasure of the board?
Well, I move to authorize the district manager to sign a letter of agreement upon review of the revision by council. Okay.
Okay, we have a motion that's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, gentlemen. We have a motion that's been made and seconded. Do you have that language, Madam Clerk? Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yeah, just to double check, authorize the district manager to sign the letter of agreement following review by legal counsel.
That's how I have it, yes.
Okay, cool. Then I got it. And then who was the second?
Stonebreaker.
Perfect. Okay, roll call. Director John Stonebreaker,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Steve Roderick,
Aye.
Chairperson Alma Green.
Aye.
Motion carries with 3 ayes.
Thank you, everyone, on this agenda item. And next, new business agenda item 6.2, submission of fiscal year 2026-2027 budget calendar information. I believe, board members, you have a copy of that in your packet. I think it's on page 15, if I remember correctly. And hopefully all board members have seen this, looked at it. If you have any questions or discussions of staff as it's formatted and we're being asked to, I don't know if we're being asked to take any action. We're sharing
actually,
information.
yeah.
We're sharing information.
Just kicking off the budget season.
Right.
We will have actually tonight on our district report, a mid-year review from our district accountant. So
Okay.
we can discuss a little bit about the budget there, but this is simply just laying out our process for the year.
Okay, just for the record, I'll just ask my fellow board members that we acknowledge receipt of this. Okay,
Acknowledged.
thank you very much. So we're going to move on. We're ready to hear the district report this evening. I'm sorry it took so long to get there, folks and staff, but item 7.1, you want to kick it off? District manager?
Actually, I think we'll kick it off pretty quickly with Catherine's running through the numbers and just giving some observations on where we are with our budget halfway through the year.
Hello. Okay, so just to start off, I wanted to point out that the tax revenue is 0. However, we did receive our tax revenue in December while we were on break. So I put it in for January, but the amount is $703,564.37. So that would put us at about 53% of what we budgeted. Another note I wanted to make was our impact fees. We're at 289% of what we budgeted. And that is because we received payment for the CHIP housing on Lake Ridge and Cypress Senior Apartments, I believe is what it's called. Both of those were substantial payments. So that's why we are so far above budget. As far as the rest of our revenue goes, we're pretty much on track with everything except for grant income, which is one of those we gotta get them to pay us type of scenario. So we can't actually guarantee that they're going to pay us in a timely manner, but we have been getting grant payments for reimbursement requests that we submit. I personally do a quarterly for one of the grants. Christy does, oh man, she does a few of them. But she does a monthly request for the Neighbor to Neighbor grant. So that's why Neighbor to Neighbor is mainly the one we see paying because they do on a monthly basis.
Catherine, I have a question.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you know this offhand. I know that that's been a challenge for us just because of the lag time with it and impacts our cash flow and all that.
Mhm.
But when I look at that number, the 404 100,000
Yeah.
on grant income, that seems in comparison to last year a lot more at this time of year than what we've had in the past. Is that correct, or do you know offhand?
Honestly, I don't remember offhand. There's so many numbers that fly around in my head. Yeah. So I can look into that.
Okay, that might be useful because I think for board, we've been talking about, we believe, and we've asserted that there's a lag time and we're starting to catch up to it, starting to get synced up. And I think if board members saw year over year comparison, that might show a big trend on, if it's quite a bit more than last year.
So if you do that comparison from year to year, can you provide that to the finance committee?
Absolutely, yeah.
Because it's time for the finance committee to see what that trend is.
Yeah.
For the betterment of
Very
the
good, very good.
full board. Thank you, Catherine.
As mentioned by Jim, we have earned almost $1 million and we're only halfway through the year. So for what we had planned on receiving in interest, we're already at the 86.5% line and we still have more interest to come. So we're doing really good on our interest income. Moving down to expenses. I wanted to note that our insurance is at 84.7%, but it is fully paid for the year. So we will not have any more interest payments involved in that. So we kind of overguessed what our interest payment was going to be. So that was a good point. The next one I wanted to talk about was accounting. It is at 108%. And the reason for this is because there were some invoice requests from our auditor for the previous audit. And so unfortunately, they fall in this fiscal year. And that was the total of their request was about 20,000. So that's why we are maxed out, is because it was for the previous audit, the close up of the charge for it.
Be more to come.
Yeah,
during the
because they're
duration of
on to the
this
next
fiscal
audit.
year.
Mm-hmm.
That's always been a problem in my estimation as one member of this board. And I realize this is the last obligation we have with this particular auditor.
No, we have one more audit
One
year.
more after this.
Mhm.
Excuse my
Yeah.
French. Because this trend's got to change somehow. I don't know if next time we go out and contract with some firm, that there's got to be a stipulation saying that if you fail to deliver in a timely manner, then we can withhold a certain percentage of the agreed upon contract amount.
I'll leave that to legal to
I
to
understand
figure
that.
out.
I'm just saying that's how frustrating this has been for this district, because it wasn't until about, and I'm the historian here, and Steve's been here a long time too, but when we had a local auditor that always bid and did our audits,
They
always
were
timely.
quicker.
Of course, we were much smaller budgeted district at that time historically. Everything changed since the campfire and the PG&E lawsuit payout. So yeah, it's interesting.
Well, I think in our history, campfire and COVID stacked up, created some disruption, to say the least.
It's on you, by the way, Catherine. You're doing a tremendous job for our
Thank you.
district.
Turning to the second page of this report, I wanted to note that under repair and maintenance, the pool category, majority of those payments of that 30,000 is our pool chemicals. So that is majority of it. And now that it's wintertime, we tend to back off on the chemicals. So it's not as much that we're paying out until we start to get the pool ready again to open. It'll tick back up. Right below it, vehicle repair and maintenance. We did have a van that needed to have a lot of repairs, and insurance did cover part of it, but not the whole part. So part of this repair and maintenance for vehicles is due to the repair of the van and also purchasing tires for a couple different vehicles because they were getting to the dangerous point. Moving down to staff, safety and staff supplies. That one's at 70%, and that is mainly because we purchased new staff shirts for our maintenance crew. Their shirts were getting a little worn out, so we had to go and get them some new shirts, and also for PPE and first aid supplies. And then below where it is telephone and internet, that is telephone and internet for Terry Ash, our satellite site, which is just across the street, the Billy Park, the pool, and our cell phones. So it's a lot. So, and we have Comcast for our internet, but it's at 3 different sites. So we have 3 different accounts, which means we have to make 3 different checks. And that's why you will see multiple Comcast checks, is because they all have different return addresses. And I have no idea why it is this way. But that is one of the things I wanted to note when we talked about this telephone and internet situation. We still have AT&T for the satellite site. So they're on AT&T internet. And then it's my understanding that the PCC has AT&T as well. So we will still have AT&T until that situation gets worked out. And that's about everything that I wanted to talk about. But if you guys have anything you want to ask about.
I just wanted to ask about the accounting of item 4900 interest income. So
Mhm.
this is like realized values at maturity minus purchase price. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay. So that's why it might be variable, that even though the value of our portfolio is increasing at less than 6% annually, we just happen to have a lot of longer term investments coming to maturity during the first half of this fiscal year.
Mhm.
So that 86% isn't necessarily able to be projected across. And that's why McQuote provided us with this, that said we expect less in the first half of 26 than we received in the latter half of 25.
Yes.
Thank you for clarifying.
It also has our California class in that interest line. So we only have, we're at over $1 million now with California class, but it still earns a good amount of like 3,000 interest, 4,000.
And we do have money market
A month.
accounts for some of our other banking too.
Yes.
So we get some smaller amounts for it, but it's at least working for the district.
So Catherine, overall, when you say that we're pretty much on track within the budget as estimated and as we adopted for this fiscal year,
Mm-hmm.
that's safe to say that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's, you can see there's a lot of these we're anticipating future income or expenses coming up as the seasons change. But, since we adopted this approach of giving a kind of a mid-year peak, it kind of helps us with our budget kickoff and sort of, there may be some things that board members may look at that they want to keep an eye on at this point and just see how it progresses as we go through there. But at least gives you kind of a baseline for judging future budgets and some of the discussions we're going to have over the next few months.
It does help. It does help. The one gray area that's in my mind is the multitude of grants that we have that we're trying to operate with and keep on track with, and the lag of reimbursement timing, that's very gray to me. So it's depicted sometimes budgetarily like this, the way it is. But having said that, would be helpful at some point in time. And we did do this once or twice before, but it's not a frequent occurrence. And I know it's time consuming for staff, but an assembly, detailed, here's all the grants that we currently have. Here's the stages that they're at. Here's the reimbursement related to that type of thing. We get that kind of information. We can give you direction as policymakers, whether or not we want you to prioritize one as opposed to the other, that type of thing, perhaps. I'm just saying.
Mm-hmm.
That might be, we from time to time, as the chairs mentioned, we've done an update with that, kind of a snapshot in time. It is fairly time consuming for us to do that because it's, we got a bunch of these going on, but we could certainly give that high level view is good. And I think Krista and I can work on that. That might be something worthwhile at the finance committee, so we can spend some time in there rather than devote
Agreed.
time in here for it.
Yeah, I'd like to have that on the next finance committee agenda, as it sort of works into the budget schedule that I've previously asked about understanding when you have these, anticipated grant income. Some of this is reimbursements for expenses that have already been incurred, and some of this is anticipated reimbursements for expenses that have not yet occurred. So just as we go into the budget cycle, I'd like to have that discussed within Finance Committee. And I think my fellow committee member agrees. Yeah. While I have the microphone, I'd like to ask also about the line item 5010, wages and salaries. So does this include the back pay that was promised to employees whose classifications got bumped up with a new salary chart?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions from the board? All right, thank you very much, Catherine. Let's go on for the remainder of the district report if we can, district manager.
Yeah, I'm actually going to be really quick about this. I'll just mention a couple of things. We have a pretty robust report here, but one thing that I think has only been mentioned in passing to board members, but we've been working on for a year now, looking at some updates to our recreational software and rental reservation system. So we're at a point of potentially making some operational changes on that. And we're looking at that agreement and the impacts to us, but we're looking at potentially getting that in place or wanting to get that in place for the next fiscal year with a little bit of a internal beta testing and some testing for that over the next few months. So as we get kind of clarity on the details and make sure that system is a go, then we'll bring that agreement likely to the board at that point. But we're working out a few details. Has been pretty vetted by staff. And like I said, it's over a long period of time. I was going to bring to attention of our board, we'll see where this goes, but we have some pool repairs that we're needing to act on. We had some new work done on it, and we're going to follow up with the contractor because we're not satisfied with the work. So there may be some update I can provide at a later meeting on that, but I just want to put it on your guys' radar. I look at this activity guide, or excuse me, the report, and I have to say it seems like December and Santa Claus and tree lighting were so long ago, but it was just last month. But we had a very full end of year finishing up, and there's a pretty good list of things here. Anything from, actually, we don't mention much about that Santa's visit here, but the hoop shoot to esports to kicking off some preliminary work on our Ridge Hiking Association and our HTTN program. This year, we're going to revert back to having a focus each meeting. So we'll have one of our staff that will give a little bit of a report. Tonight was Catherine in finance. And so we'll focus on some of these programs, anything from volunteers to some of the recreation programs to parks. So if there are any requests, we're going to develop that kind of a calendar for the year so we can give our staff a heads up so they can prep for it. But if there's any requests, let me know. That being said, I know two of our key rec staff members are here tonight, Scott and Connor. I don't know if you guys have anything you want to report on the multitude of activities we had in December. What?
Thank you, Mr. FSEP. I think the most important thing that Dan didn't mention on there is that the neighbor to neighborhood grant, grant, apparently I didn't mention it either, right? Has been extended. So one of the things that we want to look at is celebrating this massive thing that we did. And we're going to take our time ensuring that we tell that story well. One of the lessons we've learned is if we have someone else tell the story, it's often not nuanced or doesn't tell the some of the key components of the work that we're doing. Something that also kind of made into this month was the Good Fire Festival. The video came out from Ev Duran, and we'd like everyone to see that. We don't have it pulled up for tonight, but we want to make sure everyone sees that as one of the highlights of the Networking Neighborhoods program. And we're not yet at a place where we know how to fold in all of this media that we've taken in. So that's something we're looking forward to in this next year, finding out, getting some direction from you all on the board, how you all would like us to tell this story. Because ultimately you are going to be champions of this amazing work that we've done. And we'd like you to be able to speak on behalf of it and point towards the pictures while you're doing it.
But with that in mind, are we talking about telling that story once the extended neighbor program concludes, or
Yeah, I
or
can
just before it concludes?
Yeah, I can mention that. So we have an extension till March. Allows us a few programs, not really to kick it off, but I think important, or to finish it up in a big way as monumental as it's been to the community. I think our partners, but we are looking at potentially an end of project-like event to help bookend a really nice kickoff that we had at Billy Park. I think the important thing for us to think about as a staff, and I'm planning on us having a report to that following the March one, so we can do an overall kind of report. So probably April or May would be the logical points for that. We will have some of that touched on with our upcoming recreation evaluation report. So some of that will be covered there. But I think for us to think about it kind of in a systematic way, look at the whole program, where we are. And I think importantly for us, we kind of had elements of this kind of built into what we were doing anyway, trying to build some things with partners, our community grant program. We had a few relatively small but important grants that were made to partners that enable them to do things. And I think looking at how do we continue, not necessarily that program, but the idea of these partnerships that have built up over the last year and a half, how do we continue those going forward? And it may look very different, may have a different funding source, obviously, or different scale, but I think it gives us a chance this was very good venture capital on investing in social connection in the community. And so what do we do with these kind of this information we've built in kind of partnerships? So I think there's a lot for us to think about and digest it a bit. Some of it will be previewed in the rec eval report, but I think we'll have probably more thoughtful things to say in April or May with the overall evaluation of the program.
The most immediate thing that we're doing to kind of breadcrumb that out is we have the activity guide coming up. It's what most of my life's energy is going into right now. And Sophia has provided a really, really neat partner shout out with a long list of the partners that have benefited from our partnership. That's the most upcoming thing that we've got is the activity guide is in process right now. And per Dan's recommendation, it's going to look a little bit more like a magazine this time that you would pick up as opposed to one of our traditional documents. Does that round it out? Thank you very much.
Just a couple of other items I was going to mention there, and I'm skipping over a lot of good information there. So if you guys have questions, contact me afterward or after the meeting tonight. But we are looking at extending two things. One is providing information to the state for hazard mitigation grant program. And then we've also made a request that's in process for no cost extension for the brick project. That would allow us to get that information out to the public, get some feedback on some of the products in a more, I think, measured pace over the next few months rather than the hurried pace that was kind of impossible to follow. So we'll have more information of that coming up. And then we'll continue at the Rec and Park Committee meeting, provide updates on not only the new construction projects, but the rebuild. So we'll be going over that the next few weeks here. Happy to answer any questions. I know it's spent a lot of time on things tonight, but if there's anything that board members have questions about, be happy to try and answer them.
I would say that the capacity building for the partners has been the biggest benefit of the neighbor to neighbor. And I know as one board member, I'd like to see that highlighted at the end of the project. And I would also ask, what
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part.
I'm sorry, I said that the capacity building for the partners has been the biggest benefit of the neighbor to neighbor grant. And I, as one board member, would like to see that highlighted in the wrap up of the project. And I did want to ask, what is the current status of the Nexus fee study?
Oh, that is perfect timing. So I have more to say on our next district report. We are restarting that effort right now. So just got an email back from our consultant on it. He's going to review the materials that we've submitted so far, lay out a calendar for us. The idea of it that we would have impact fee consideration before the end of the fiscal year. So he's working out that calendar and seeing what information needs he has.
So when you hear back from the consultant, can that information be provided to Finance Committee?
Yeah, and that's our intent. So right there.
That's what we would like to see. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions concerning the district report from any board members? Hearing none, I think we'll just conclude that at this point. We're going to move on to item 8, board comments. We'll start with Director Roderick. Do you have any board comments you want to share for the good of the board and the audience?
I've got a couple at least. I know I alluded to the PASH grand opening being slated for this January 24th. That unfortunately had to be postponed. It also corresponds with the memorial service for Congressman LaMalfa, and most of the town staff will be down at the fairgrounds attending that. However, that does open up an opportunity for the Hope Plaza planting on the same day. And so I think we'll turn the PASH grand opening into a Hope Plaza planting. And once we get a new ribbon cutting date for the animal shelter, I will be announcing that here. Another item, if maybe some of you are aware, SB 1383, the organics minimization, keeping organics out of the landfill, essentially. I was curious as to what we as a district are doing to follow the edicts of SB 1383, particularly with a new commercial kitchen, and how we're going to address separating the organics from the landfill dedicated trash. It's going to take like an all hands on deck performance if we want to be totally compliant. Just kind of a heads up to staff that maybe we should have I don't know, with either through the Park and Rec Committee or a special ad hoc committee on how we can comply with the new directive.
I have a question on that. I know a lot of that, when I've talked to some of our partners, other places, there's such a tremendous burden when it kicks into either pests control and management. And, I guess I'm monitoring this a little bit, not very closely, but I was hoping that there'd be guidance from our waste haulers, that there would be some programs that would be installed. I'm just kind of curious if you know how that's progressing or not.
There is some didn't mean to interrupt you, Steve, but there is some forthcoming from our waste hauler.
For residential applications, it's aimed at that, but the legislation also targets commercial and governmental facilities. So it's something that we're going to have to address at some point, particularly when our commercial kitchen gets into full throttle.
Is that something that Director Roderick would like to follow up and provide some guidance and detailed information?
I could throw my banana peel in the ring and
not in our ring.
Mm-hmm.
Does that conclude your board comments tonight, Director Roderick?
I'm done.
Director Stonebreaker?
Yeah, I would also like to mention the passing of our congressman, even if he and I didn't agree on everything. He was the best we were going to get in the district that we were drawn into, and took a lot of time and energy to help to provide justice to the many victims of Camp Fire, especially repeatedly introducing legislation for the tax forgiveness that finally did get passed. So I just want to acknowledge his efforts and the efforts of his local office that will continue to provide constituency services even while our seat in Congress is vacant. So after our last meeting here, I had a bit of a crunch of meetings as everyone was trying to cram 4.5 weeks of meetings into 3. So on the morning of the 11th, I went down to the BCAG meeting and had some words for their staff regarding building a better beeline. They did acknowledge that switching to the on-demand service was probably not justified given current ridership levels, and we do still have fixed route service for the time being onto the Upper Ridge. And then following that, I stayed for the AQMD meeting where the chair received my comments and then asked me for additional information where I was able to clarify that with the extensive cutting of green trees on the upper ridge, people are cutting these logs into lengths and splitting them and burning them, whether they're cured or not, creating smoke impacts to the neighborhoods, and also that the emphasis in both the town and the unincorporated portions of the district on creating defensible space has led to a lot of vegetative waste on especially the larger properties that is also being burned, whether it's cured or not. And acknowledging that AQMD doesn't have a staffing to enforce the regulations on individual residential burners, that they're focused on ag and industrial sources, asked if they could provide better guidance so that people could be informed and maybe use a little bit of peer pressure to get their neighbors to comply. And then when I sat down, one of their employees said that, oh, we just put out a press release the day before, which was exactly what I had been looking for. And we were able to show that through Upper Ridge Community Council. The next day, I went to the Wildfire Safety Summit and sat through a lot of sort of pre-rehearsed interviews. It's good to have all of those stakeholders in one room, so I am thankful to Fire Safe Council for providing that venue. Heard some things about what the district may or may not be doing that one of the presenters was more confident about than I am. And then I got to go to the supervisors meeting the following Tuesday, and a couple of medical appointments trying to get myself back in shape after my miserable experience. I mentioned at one of my other recent meetings that the loss of Feather River Hospital is a tremendous impediment to the recovery of this entire area, and especially with the situation at Glenn Medical, followed by the declaration of bankruptcy at Orville Hospital, which is causing many Orville Hospital employees to seek more reliable employment elsewhere. A number of Orville Hospital employees are like commuting from Placer via Marysville to get to those jobs. And so that's creating additional staffing shortages and delays to get care. So this is like beyond the scope of our district, but just to emphasize that, you know, the situation, which has been quite bad since Feather River closed, is not getting better. And that, you know, it's nice to see that Town of Paradise just announced they finaled 100 new housing units last month, and Magalia finaled 33 for the entire year. So we still have this inequity in the recovery, and I hope that the district is able to receive enough revenues from the recovery of the tax base to fund all of our exciting projects. That's what I need to say.
Okay, thank you, Director Stonebreaker. Under board comments this evening for myself and as your current chair, I too attended the annual wildfire summit meeting in the month of December, which occurred, can't recall if it was before or after our regular meeting on December 10th, but anyway, I attended that and I found that to be very informative, and it has been that way for several years now, annually. And I thought staff did a good job of their presentation of our neighbor program. That was really appreciated by a lot of people in the audience. I also attended, as I'm required to do, the monthly Butte LAFCO meeting that occurred this month on the first Thursday of this month on the 9th. All I have to report from that meeting, because it was a very light agenda, was that there was one agenda item that pertained to authorizing the detachment of 3 properties from from the Biggs West Gridley Water District. And in addition to that, which is done annually, Butte LAFCO had authorized the creation of what they call their budget committee, which is members of the LAFCO commission themselves, and their annual function is to work with staff on the next coming fiscal year budget and eventually craft that for presentation to the full commission, usually in the month of May or thereabouts, I forget. That's pretty light. And one other comment I'd like to just share this evening as your current chair, and it's just more of an observation, and this applies to myself as well as all the board members. I believe the intent of the board comment item on our regular agenda is intended for us to report on things that are somewhat related to our district for the most part, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly. And in particular, as board members, if we're assigned as liaison representatives on behalf of the district, something may come up from time to time that maybe you can use board comment to share that, if you would. And then lastly, my last comment is those of us on the board that are assigned to various committees, it's extremely important and it makes us much more functional and helps the staff if we're requested to respond to something electronically, emails or otherwise, that we be timely in acknowledging receipt and respond to it, please. It precludes delays in time, and maybe it precludes any misunderstandings that have occurred during the course of a calendar year. And this is just something I'm sharing. It applies to myself as well. I need to be more conscientious of that. And I'm hoping that all the boards will, members and your assignments, that you'll follow through on that in good faith. So with that, that's my last comment. And we're going to declare the meeting adjourned.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if I may, we had a earlier question that I posed about the grant comparison year to year, and our district accountant diligently looked it up. We're about double where we were this time last year. So we're about over 200, close to 200K over our grant income from last year, just for information.
You want to look that up?
Yeah.
Okay, that's just the 2 fiscal years being compared. Right.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just as a base point in time comparison, it's just useful to see that we're on a quicker pace than we were last year.
That sounds promising. Thank you for sharing that. And again, over time, maybe, we're dealing with grants, a multitude of grants over several years. So it's just good to acknowledge trends if they're favorable or not, that type of thing. But okay, at this point in time, I want to declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you everyone for coming this evening. It's much appreciated.